on.
Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the
Hi there, it's me again, opening my big mouth about things that are happening on the island. I want to start this little rant, if you want to call it a rant. And it's a rant about the lack of comprehensive sex education in Trinidad and Tobago. I want to start it off by talking about a personal experience from my childhood, just to put things into context, for everyone. When I was around 7 years old, my father, who had, after a very long and tedious and acrimonious custody battle, finally won sole custody of me, and found himself having to now raise a girl child, and which meant, having to broach certain subjects. His way of broaching the birds and the bees with me was buying this book. Some of you may know this book. It's been around for a long time. Where Did I Come From? It uses these really funny cartoons. And since my father saw that I was an avid reader already at 7, instead of having the personal talk, he just bought this book, handed it to me, and yeah, that was my introduction about how sex happens, why it happens, and how babies come into the world. At 7, of course, for me, I think this information is fascinating. I'm wondering, do my other school friends know about this? So that book found its way into my school bag. And I pranced along, proud and happy, innocent as ever, because for me, this is just as exciting as learning about the planets, about learning about how seedlings grow up from seeds when you put it in some wet toilet paper and you make it sprout. This is just as exciting to me as that. There's no perverse reason in my 7-year-old brain. I want to share this with everyone. So in my school bag, take the book to school, San Fernando Anglican Girls Primary School, and yeah, show it to my classmates. And the result was a huge uproar, scandal. Parents, teachers, principal have to be called in. The girl sharing rudeness with the other students. That's the first thing I want to share with you. Thing number 2, you may not know this about me and my history, but when I was 20, perhaps going on 21, I was a Durex girl. Yeah. I was in my little Durex top and cap and the little short pants around carnival season, handing out condoms at all the fetes and the calypso tents and the bars and so on. They needed someone with gumption, someone who was not easily embarrassed to do this, and I volunteered to do it. And so I was there out. It was a very interesting experience. It ranging from handing out condoms particularly to men and being propositioned by those men thinking, oh, well, it's a woman handing out condoms, it means she wants sex from me. Also, just the reactions of embarrassment. And I'm going to date myself here because this is in the 90s. So I want to talk about one of the encounters I had as a Durex girl back then. And it was at Spectacular Forum. Ooh, I'm real dating myself. Spectacular Forum. So I'm there handing out condoms. Have a safe carnival, make sure to, protect yourself, have safe sex, protect yourself. And I'm assuming that, everyone coming in, they're adults. This is a calypso tent, so, there's rude calypsos, it's of a certain subject matter. So you're not expecting children to be there. A woman comes in, and I'm handing it out to everyone. She comes in, I think it's 2 women, around the same age, perhaps. I didn't notice any particular significant age difference. So I'm handing it out, And she just recoils and she slaps it away from me. Get that away from me. You cannot see. I am here with my child. Child. Apparently she was there with her teenage daughter. And, you know, what kind of thing are you encouraging? Get that away from me. My daughter's too young to be having sex. I apologize profusely. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I did not realize, you know. And I mean, she walked away in a huff, muttering under her breath. What kind of thing going on in this place? Do you know, during the course of the night, later on, when the mother was not looking, her daughter, who I guess was probably around 16, 17, I don't know, came and she took like 2 condoms from me. That's the second thing I wanted to talk about. Reference I wanted to draw. And it's just to set the stage for what Trinidad and Tobago is like with regard to sex. And our unhealthy hypocrisy and shame and stigma around this subject. And our refusal to address it in any kind of evidence and realistic way. And it is the reason why in 2019 we do not have comprehensive sex education in schools. And the other huge reason we do not have it is because of the interference of religious bodies in what is a public health issue. And the interference in this issue is the same type of interference they would have had back in my day, back when HIV/AIDS was ripping apart Trinidad and Tobago and affecting so many people. And the only response from the religious community was, the only safe sex is marital sex. Tell us anything else, we get vex. Marital sex is the safest sex there is at a time when married women were contracting HIV from their philandering husbands. Again, an unrealistic and predominantly superstitious-based approach to what is a human and public health issue. Imagine if we approached every single human health and public safety health issue like this. Imagine if a company that had to handle hazardous chemicals and had to employ staff to be in contact with these hazardous chemicals 8 hours out of the day, unsupervised for the most part. They just said, you know what the approach we are going to have to this issue is to deal with, you know, the possible human error that can occur, that could result in injury and death and, you know, so on. What we're going to do every morning, we're all just going to pray, hold hands and pray that we are safe. That's how we're going to approach this. And hopefully no accidents will happen. Imagine if we did it like that. But no, we don't. We don't. You work in a chemical factory, in a refinery. You work in a plant where there are chemicals that can cause injury or death, or equipment that can cause injury or death. And you, as an employee of that place, you are expected to undergo some kind of health and safety, some kind of OSHA training, because there is the expectation, the realistic and evidence-based expectation that human error will occur regardless. And therefore you need to preempt that. Now we have a situation where we say, okay, let's place hundreds of hormonally charged up, hot and raring to go. And if you think that is not the case with students who are puberty and beyond in schools, I'm sorry, but you are living in la la land. Let us put all of these students, boys and girls, together, their hormones raging, in an environment to spend 8 hours of the day together, mostly unsupervised, and we will give them no training no preparation for what is the realistic and human thing that is going to happen when you place a bunch of hormonally charged people together for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, unsupervised, boys and girls who are living within the context of a very sexually explicit culture, coming from homes, some of them, where there is a lot of emotional dysfunction, where there is sexual molestation, where there is pornography, where there is all kinds of sexual situations happening and they're being bombarded with, where there are generational single parent and teenage pregnancies within their family, where the girls have to go through a gauntlet of sexual harassment from the minute they start sprouting breasts, and this I know from the time I was 9 years old and the little buds started coming out, where they're being bombarded with sexual harassment from the bus drivers that are driving them to school and the maxi-taxi men, where a lot of the girls are dealing with self-esteem and body issues and lack of positive reinforcement from their own families, and sometimes even jealous mothers who are jealous of their own daughters' young and budding sexuality and how much more appealing it is to their older, used-up one, and therefore refuse to endorse that beauty that is coming up. And the girls are being bombarded with men saying, oh gosh, darling, Dudu, you're so nice, you're so sexy. Ooh, I love you, I love you. Yes, I will buy this for you, I'll buy that for you. I will treat you like a queen, I will treat you real nice. You could be your own woman with me. And they're coming into a school, spending 8 hours, 5 days a week, mostly unsupervised, and we expect that nothing is going to happen. Well, I think the headlines that we had over the past 2 weeks of students having sex, girls being coerced into sex, a girl pregnant for a male, well, who else would she be pregnant for? Pregnant for a school teacher, a Form 5 student pregnant for a teacher in the school, that the rates of teenage pregnancy in Trinidad and Tobago are up, and that a significant amount of those pregnancies are between teenage girls and older men. And the response, the initial response from our Minister of Education is, I don't know what's going on, nobody tell me, I don't know. That really happening? Nobody, I am not aware, I don't know. Is that really acceptable in 2019? Is that acceptable to you? And you might be one of the conscientious parents who, like, my parent did, at least took some steps to begin the process, although it was a very rudimentary thing just to hand a 7-year-old a book called Where Did I Come From? And no other training on, predator proofing your child from molestation and what to do in the event that happens and to look out for the signs of it happening. No preparation for what is going to soon happen, and puberty is happening sooner and sooner to girls. What is going to happen to your body and the ramifications and things that are going to come with it and the pressures and social pressures that are going to come with it. Yes, I know there's some parents who are taking those steps and doing it, but then you're sending your kids to school with parents who are not. You're sending your kids to school with parents who are actually teaching kids really horrible and bad things, and kids who are exposed to some really disgusting, exploitative, and unhealthy sexual situations in their home. They're seeing their mother with several baby daddies. They're seeing their aunts and their cousins and whatnot going after blesser men, exchanging sex for favors. They're in a situation where the young men around them, that is how they treat women. And they're going to school with your child and pressuring your child, and there is no overarching authority in that school that is enforcing a particular type of culture that is going to foster healthy sexual attitudes at that level, because it's not being done in many homes in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, there seems to be some preliminary talk happening at last, I think because the headlines have scandalized the ministry, and the just total disconnect has scandalized them to the point where they're saying, oh, you know, maybe we should do something, maybe we should. But I just want to end this by leaving a little proviso, a little word of caution in how we go forth with framing this sex education thing, and what you as a parent who is actively involved in your PTA or in your school or as an alumni, what you need to be pushing for in your school, and even as a student who may be well informed and healthily informed, what you should be pushing for in your school. And it is not, I repeat, it is not religious abstinence only education.
Well, we now have a record, we have some data to look at, and we can tell you which is better, abstinence-centered education or full disclosure sex education. So take a look at this chart here. This is high school student sexual behavior, and what we're comparing is Mississippi versus the rest of the U.S. The green bar is Mississippi, the blue bar is the rest of the U.S. In other words, kids in Mississippi, where they teach primarily abstinence-centered education from the year 2008 to 2011, kids in Mississippi had more sexual intercourse when they were being taught this abstinence-centered curriculum compared to the rest of the U.S., which it's more of a mix of some abstinence plus, and a lot of blue states and moderate states have just flat-out sex education. So in other words, the places that have more sex education have a lower amount of kids actually engaging in sexual intercourse. Mississippi, abstinence-centered, boom, it shoots through the roof, more kids are fucking. All right, now look at the next one here. The teen birth rates from 2008 to 2011. Okay, Mississippi is the blue bar, red is the United States. Okay, teen birth rate in Mississippi, way more than the rest of the United States of America. So in other words, again, if you have a curriculum that's abstinence-centered and you tell kids, no, stop it, deny your natural urges, stop it, that doesn't work. Kids get more curious and they say, well, I don't know, we've never learned anything about this, we don't know what's going on here, but it feels good, so let's do it. Well, what happens? You have teen birth rate rises. But in states where they teach sex education, comprehensive sex education, and in the U.S. In general, you see a much lower teen birth rate. And the reason is, when you actually take kids from just before or right at the point where they're developing and when they're, becoming sexually curious and they're figuring out what's going on, if you actually explain things to them and give them information and data and knowledge and say, look, here's the deal. This is what's going on in your bodies, girls, guys. This is why you're getting hard randomly. Here are the different processes. Here's what happens in the process of reproduction. Here's what you need to do whenever you go down that road. Condoms are what you should do. The pill. If something happens, you go to a family planning center. If you explain everything to them and let them soak it in, they make better decisions. It turns out more information leads to better decisions.
Abstinence is one part of comprehensive sexual education. And the abstinence has to be about the practical and the evidence-based reasons for avoiding premature sexual activity, and helping the students to choose abstinence from an informed and empowered place. It is not about, don't have sex and go make Jesus mad with you. No, it does not work. And we know it does not work because the United States, who we like to emulate, they have had abstinence only sex education in several states And we're able to measure the effects of this over the course of time. And the effects have shown in black and white results that it does not work. Just shaming students, don't have sex, it will make Jesus mad with you. Don't have sex, it will make you a used up, chewed up piece of gum. Do you want to be an unwrapped piece of candy or used up piece of gum? That has zero impact. The people coming out of that training, the girls who have come out of that training have said it has actually screwed them up sexually and made them so ashamed of just sex in general that they were not able to be properly informed on many, many, many different issues. So what we need is the kind of sex education that is actually working. You can look, the evidence is there, and you can look for where the comprehensive sex education is effective. You know why? Because the teenage pregnancy rates are down. Sexual coercion in the schools and bullying over sexual issues and sexuality is down. Abortion rates down. We need that type of sex education in Trinidad and Tobago, and we need it to be culturally relevant to our very sexy and sexually explicit culture, because it is very difficult for young people to make this complete abstinent thing when they are just bombarded with sex in the media, everywhere, in the culture, in the music, in our festivals, everything. We need to be realistic about the type of people we are. We need to be realistic about the type of homes these young people come from and the things that are going on in those homes. I know some efforts are being made. Roger Alexis, who does this wonderful adult puppet series, he has teamed up with the Family Planning Association to do something. I will leave a link in the description.
Good morning, Mommy.
Morning, sweetheart.
Mommy,
Yes?
why do people have sex?
What?
I know a lot of parents, they would like to homeschool and you would like resources. I will leave a link in that in the description as well to mysexed.com. It's a resource out of Canada. There is also someone called Nadine Thornhill who has a YouTube channel. She's very personable. And specifically to our culture, we have a formidable and wonderfully, knowledgeable and educated person called Onika Henry, who has already been consulting with schools. Schools have called her in, churches call her in to tackle these very difficult and complex issues. And she is available, and I will leave a link in the description. So this is I hope it's not just a rant. I hope I've left it with some kind of way forward for people to go to and resources that they can avail themselves of, and it's not just a complaining, ranting thing, because I'm all about solutions right now, not just about complaining. And let me just say, I still believe with all my heart that the first point of contact, the first people to be telling children and explaining to them about sex and sexuality should be their parents. It should be. Ideally, it should be. But let us live in the real world, please. Let us live in the world that we're living in right now. That does not happen. And we are entrusting this task to often incapable and unhealthy people who are parents to do it, and they can't do it. They cannot do it. So where they fall short, social welfare and overall social services, it needs to step in. And it needs to step in with realistic, evidence-based things that are based on what are the facts and the figures, and that is what they need to go with. Not what is religious superstition, not what is one church's will or one church's agenda. Just like a factory with hazardous chemicals, it cannot rely on religious superstition to keep people safe. It has to rely on practical and proven evidence-based methods for doing so. It's the same thing with this situation. And I hope, this, you can use this as a way to share with people, in a probably just a more concise way, why you believe this should be so. And if you would like to get on board with the advocacy happening, there is a group called We Write on Facebook that you can join as well. And yeah, I leave you with that. And love to everyone. Let's continue pushing. Okay? Bye.
Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that